Hello again, I am Blunty, and in a video I put up yesterday I discussed how the 4K gaming of the new PlayStation 4 Pro isn't really 4K at all. And in fact, most games will be rendered at a lower resolution and upscaled using fancy tricks to make it look like it's a little bit crisper than it really should be and all that sort of stuff, but it's not true 4K gaming. Now, it is true that since I put that video up, more information has come out and one or two games will run natively at 4K, but considering the power level of the PlayStation 4 Pro, it is unlikely that will be the rule, that will be the exception. Most games out there, particularly sort of graphics-heavy AAA titles, will be running at a low resolution and raised up. And on top of all that, whenever a new console is announced, or indeed a new version of an existing console as the PlayStation 4 Pro is, you will always find in the various tubes that make up the internet discussions about, well, what kind of PC could you make for the same amount of money? Can you make a better performing PC gaming rig for the same amount of money that it would cost you a console, PC Master Race and console killer and blah? Well, I'm not gonna do that. This video is actually about what it takes to actually do true, proper, natively rendered 4K gaming for the living room. And I'm not going to focus on making it as absolutely cheap as possible in order to directly compete with the, bargain price of the PlayStation 4 Pro. What I'm going to do instead is keep it as cheap as possible, but not compromise on true native rendered 4K gaming that looks good and plays good. And I have developed two different options. One is very much budget minded, doing it as cheap as possible without compromising that 4K gaming experience. And the other one is the rig that I would personally build if I wanted to build a living room friendly 4K gaming machine without spending the earth and sort of going full hog and sort of going a bit nuts with extremely high-end gear, as I did with that rig back there. And the reason I'm doing this is not to scream PC Master Race, consoles are stupid. I love my consoles, I love my PS4, it's brilliant. I'm just doing this as sort of a thought experiment. What would it take to do 4K properly in the living room? How much would it cost to do it properly in the living room rather than the PlayStation 4 Pro, which is a compromise. It does have to balance what power it does have with what it can do in 4K, and does it have to up-res, does it have to sacrifice graphics quality to get there, and what sort of frame rates is going to run it? I don't want those compromises. But anyway, let's hop into GTA 5, take a nice Sunday drive, well, Friday drive I suppose, and tell you all about the rigs I've put together. Now, just before we begin, all of the parts lists I'm about to show you come from a single retailer, an Australian retailer. I am not affiliated with them in any way. It is PCKSgear.com. The only reason I've chosen them is because I like them. I've bought stuff from them before. Their customer service is superb. Their prices are competitive. They are reliable. So in the end, the prices I'm going to tell you about can in fact be lower if you take the time to shop around really aggressively and buy your parts from all different places depending on where you can get them cheapest. It's just for the sake of keeping things simple and consistent and easy. Everything shown here is from this one retailer. So let's do the purse strings version first. And again, this is not about doing it as absolutely crazy cheap as possible. This is about getting a true high quality native 4K uncompromised gaming experience without having to go super nuts on very, very high end gear. So, starting with the CPU, I've chosen the Intel Core i5-6400. It is the most inexpensive option for a true 4-core Intel CPU from the current Skylake lineup, and it turbos to 3.3 GHz. There are, of course, cheaper i3 chips out there you could opt for, and while I have shown before in other builds the i3 chip does do damn fine in 1080p gaming, here we are of course looking at 4K, so we want to avoid any potential performance bottlenecking the cheaper dual-core chips could cause us. Intel's basic but perfectly serviceable heatsink and fan are included in the box, so that saves us from having to worry about a third-party cooler. For the motherboard, the Gigabyte H110M is a fairly basic board, but it's from Gigabyte, a brand I have much trust in, and with 4 SATA 3 ports, 4 USB 3.0 ports, and 6 USB 2.0 port drives and external I/O are well handled. It's got gigabit LAN, 7.1 HD audio, and a nice durable build. For memory, Kingston's Value RAM 2 sticks of 4GB for the essential 8GB dual channel setup, and it does max out the RAM speed our motherboard can handle, so there's no real point in spending more to get any faster. Like much of this build, it's basic but perfectly serviceable. Like the PS4 Pro, we're going for a single hard drive. It will be a rock-solid, reliable WD Blue in 1TB, 7200 RPM. To keep costs down, we're skipping the 120GB or so SSD I'd normally put in there for a system drive to help keep things zippy. But if you do have a bit extra in your budget, that is where I would spend it. For power, a basic Silverstone Strider Essential 500-watt PSU will give us everything we need with some overhead to spare so it can run more efficiently. We need something to put them in, so we're going for a rather ugly but perfectly useful case, also from Silverstone. It's their Precision PS08. It has a nice removable fan filter for easier cleaning and a top-mounted power supply which we can use in conjunction with convection to help us move warm air out of the case a little bit more efficiency, and there's room enough in the case for a few more drives for when you need more storage space. This case is not particularly living room friendly, it's kind of hideous, frankly, but again, it's serviceable from a known brand and budget friendly. And finally, the most essential part for kicking us into 4K gaming, and where most of our budget must go, in fact, the GPU, of course. And again, with the intent of using new, current generation parts instead of scraping out something with obsoleted choices from last gen, we are going for the Gigabyte GeForce GTX 1070 Mini ITX OC 8GB card. This choice was made for several reasons, and while it's not the fastest version of the GTX 1070 you can find, it is in fact faster than the Founders Edition, being overclocked out of the box, and it is currently the cheapest GTX 1070 listed on PC Case Gear. Its short size will help us with airflow in our budget case, and with a stock CPU cooler and a single fan GPU, that is rather important to think about. Again, it's from a brand I trust, and rather vitally, it's got enough grunt to run AAA titles at 4K without having to make any vital compromises on settings or frame rates. Even in very demanding titles like Rise of the Tomb Raider, this card, in 4K, in this rig, in very high settings, should pull in somewhere around about 40-45 FPS or so pretty smoothly. Meanwhile, the PS4 Pro, with its teraflop figure of around 4.2, puts it somewhere in the neighborhood of a GTX 970 or so, which, while yes, can in fact do 4K in this game, it does need reduced settings to get there, even at just 30 FPS or so, like the PS4 Pro has to. Meanwhile, here on this rig, 4K, much smoother frame rates at higher settings, so it looks better, which is nice, but it plays better, which is really the key here. So that's the 4K budget-friendly build. It comes in at $1,200 Australian dollars. In US dollar terms, just converting directly, that's $917 or so well under $1,000. Probably even cheaper than that if you buy from local US stores, because prices are different here in Australia and blah 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 blah. But just to give you a general idea of where that falls in the ballpark with a frame of reference most of you will be familiar with. About $920 American. But what if this machine was for me, personally? What system would I build with this philosophy of living room friendly, kind to the budget, but uncompromised, true, natively rendered 4K gaming that massively outclasses the PS4 Pro's 4K halfway house balancing act? Well, it goes like this. It is a similar build and doesn't actually blow out the budget all that much over the purse string version I just detailed. We start again with the CPU, the Skylake Core i5 6500, just 30 Aussie dollars more than the 6400 in the other rig, but for that we basically get a higher base clock. 3.2 GHz over 2.7, and it turbos a little higher too, goes up to 3.6 GHz instead of 3.3. All in all, it's just a little extra power for a small extra investment. In games it probably won't be all that noticeable, truth be told, but hey, this is the choice I would make. Mobo choice is the MSI B150M Bazooka Plus. It's much more feature-rich than the other board and designed with performance gaming in mind. A few standout features above what the cheaper option had include an M.2 slot for a super fast and super small SSD we'll be using, a Type-C USB 3.1 connector so we can take advantage of the new nifty gadgets, 5 more standard USB 3.1 ports, 7.1 audio again, but this time around with even better quality implementation, and again, built tough from quality parts from a brand I trust. The RAM in this rig is 8GB again, but this time high-performance Corsair Vengeance, in red of course, because why not match the motherboard? And of course this RAM has a nice heat spreader to help keep those chips running at their best at all times. The Intel 600p series 128GB M.2 SSD will be our system drive. It will help boost overall system performance significantly and is even faster than a regular SATA-based SSD. For mass storage, I've chosen the WD Black. It is fast, it is quiet, and it has rock-solid reliability. 7200 RPM and 2TB will provide a nice big chunk of space for even drive-hungry 4K media, and of course a pile of those big-ass AAA game titles. For power, we're stepping up to Corsair's VS450. Yes, that is lower than the 500-watt version we used in the cheaper rig, but it is still more than we need to actually power this rig, and we have the added peace of mind of Corsair's reputation for reliability. For a case, the still very affordable but sleek and much more living room friendly Fractal Design Core 1000. Designed for good airflow, its simple, elegant design keeps it subtle for the living room, great drive support options for future storage expansions, and of course Fractal Design cases have a very good reputation for being very well built and easy to build in. And finally, the GPU of choice here is still the GTX 1070, but this time we're hopping up to a higher performance model, overclocked out of the box again, and even faster this time than the mini ITX OC we chose for the other rig. But with a full-sized cooler, you've got much more headroom for a significant manual overclock to really kick performance up the bum. And I do know from personal experience that Gigabyte's WindForce OC cards stay quiet and overclock really very nicely indeed, and they overclock without needing to get any louder, which is, let's face it, pretty vital for a living room rig. And all this boils down to 1,526 Aussie dollars from the PC Case Gear store at the time of publication. That only puts it at 326 Australian dollars over the cheaper option. A relatively small investment for a rather significant boost in features and even higher performance when it comes to pushing true, native-rendered, pure, honest-to-goodness 4K gaming even further. 4K gaming that is in fact far, far superior to what the still pretty damn mighty in its own right, but comparatively weak PS4 Pro can manage. To give you a pair of numbers with which to measure against and put this all in perspective, the PS4 Pro's teraflop figure is 4.2. Meanwhile, the GTX 1070's floating point performance level clocks in at 6.46 teraflops, and that's the standard Founders Edition one, not even overclocked. And it does that all on its own. That's not even counting what the CPU contributes to the system performance. So if you're having trouble envisioning the power gap here, 4.2 versus just under 6.5 minimum. That's a wide gap. Of course, being a console, the PS4 Pro's games run more efficiently and can be much better optimized, so that helps close the gap a little bit more. But at the end of the day, the PSU's APU, its brain, which is essentially based on a generations-old, low-power CPU design meant for cheap netbooks, and a generations-old AMD GPU design already outclassed back in its day by the NVIDIA equivalent, even boosted up on steroids as it is in the PS4 Pro, it just cannot do what these rigs can do when it comes to delivering a proper, pure, honest-to-goodness, native-rendered 4K gaming experience. And 1080p gaming, if you've still got a normal TV like me, forget about it. This rig destroys the PS4 Pro. But you are spending much more, of course, so there's that to add to your calculations of performance versus budget versus overall value. Honestly, for the living room, where you're sitting further away from the screen anyway, even a 4K screen, the PS4 Pro, despite the fact that games rendered in true 4K rather than upscaling tricks, will be very rare and the exception rather than the rule. It's pretty obvious most games running in 4K will absolutely need to be rendered at 1080p or 1440p, maybe even 1800p, then up-resed to 4K. But even using those lies and tricks, the games will still look damn fine, and of course much better and more detailed and cleaner and more wonderful than standard 1080p games will. It's just that they'll look and run even better on these rigs. So what it really boils down to, if you are making the choice, you've got a choice between damn good 4K gaming and absolutely superb 4K gaming if you're willing to invest a bit more. And by the way, both these rigs I have put together are well above the specs that are required for VR on PC, well above it in fact. So whenever you're ready to invest in a headset from HTC Vive or OSVR or whatever your choice happens to be, you are ready to go. But anyway, I hope you found this interesting or educational, thoughtful, just inspirational, or some other wonderful combination of adjectives and verbs that make you feel good and make your brain tick over and really sort of think about what's going on here and what it means to be a PlayStation 4 Plus Pro super duper thing, or what it means to be just a rig, just built to do 4K properly. So, I look forward to your constructive comments in the down below area, and very, very small amounts of fanboyism, hopefully. A man can dream. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.